XIII Remastered is on the horizon, and if you watch the trailer, it looks like they've done a pretty thorough overhaul of the graphics, and they might have touched up the gameplay a bit. Notable by its absence, however, is any attempt to remaster the narcoleptic voice acting of the original game.
Ow, my head.
The remaster includes new gadgets and gunfighting stuff, which is probably the biggest boon. The game's cel-shaded art style is, I guess, iconic, but really cel-shaded graphics were another onion on the belt of the early 2000s. Plenty of games generated false, temporary interest with that graphic style, but turned out to be entirely unmemorable in retrospect. The original game is like $6 on Steam. I just bought a copy on sale for $3 because I didn't want to get my box off the shelf, so the remaster has to be pretty substantial to justify a $40 launch price tag. Cause here's the dirty secret about XIII. It's a very bad game, and it takes a lot more than just remastering to fix shitty gameplay. Famous Hollywood actors started showing up in video games in two waves. The first was during the FMV boom, which might have been the only boom dumber than the 90s .com boom, or perhaps the bubble tea boom of the early 2000s. I imagine the pitch for famous actors at that time was that FMV games were basically like movies, but they were interactive. Some of them only barely. This was obviously a bad idea right off the hop, since these games were hot fucking garbage, and paying for Christopher Walken to learn lines, get into costume, and be on set for multiple takes isn't cheap. But 10 years on, video game budgets were getting bigger, and it's relatively affordable to have a famous person come into the studio to read a script and sit still for a quick face scan. So you've got your early wave of actors in games who were tricked into doing it by agents who said it was just like being in a movie. You've also got the rare licensed game properties which are able to leverage the appearance of actual actors from the parent work, instead of more common sound-alikes. Of course you have your outliers, actors who are big video game fans themselves and are doing it as more of a passion project. But most of the time when actors show up in video games, it's probably because it looks like an easy paycheck. David Duchovny was one such actor. In the span of just 2 years in the early 2000s, Duchovny provided voices for the main characters of two games, 2003's XIII and 2005's Area 51. I don't have much to say about Area 51 because it's one of those really boring, mediocre shooters that came out of the early to mid 2000s, when everybody tried to replicate Halo without understanding why Halo was so fucking great. See also Killzone. Area 51's only cool bit is where you find a severed arm to unlock a palm print scanner, and if you've played Doom 2016, you've already seen it, so don't bother to track down Area 51. XIII was not well received at the time, but it somehow managed to acquire a small cult following. Having just replayed it, XIII is much worse than I remembered it being. It has a complete lack of gameplay. This is a boilerplate FPS. You can move and shoot, technically, but the enemies don't have any advanced tactics or any interesting behaviors. The weapons don't have any interesting effects, and there are no abilities to use. The gameplay is completely textureless. Good gameplay is created by interacting systems. That's why Halo is so good. The game is built on a ton of systems that interact in a semi-organic way to create layers of gameplay you can burrow into as deeply as you care to. In XIII, you trundle around shooting really dumb bad guys and occasionally whacking the quick medkit button when your health drops too low. The shooting is punctuated by mandatory stealth segments that are pretty easy to just cheese your way through if you don't feel like crouch walking everywhere for 30 goddamn minutes. The only cool feature of the game is the little comic book style kill panels that pop up when you score a headshot or a railing kill. This is not gameplay, it's presentation. Ditto for the other comic book features like the slick animated menus or the ability to see the words tap 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 appearing over enemies even through walls. Plenty of games before this let you locate enemies by sound. I guess they just weren't ADA compliant. It doesn't take long for these effects to wear thin, especially when they cover a valuable screen real estate in the middle of combat. XIII has some of the least satisfying stealth mechanics and least satisfying weapons to ever grace a first-person shooter. The weapons have no punch, and the environments are littered with expedient melee weapons like ashtrays, broom handles, and chairs, all of which provide an instant KO that makes even your power weapons look like a fucking joke. The thing that made a lot of mass-market shooters from the 2000s so boring is that they had no rhythm. In a lot of these games, you just trade damage with enemies, then patch yourself up with health kits after each fight. A game like Halo has a tempo. You put the pressure on while your shield is up, and then slack off or go on the defensive while you wait for it to recover. I know this is going to sound pretty silly, but Halo's combat breathes. It has a pulse. It's alive. XIII's gameplay is necrotic. Even older console shooters like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark had combat that wasn't a straight-up slugfest. In those games, the shootouts are almost balletic. In GoldenEye, you're not supposed to take damage, you're supposed to avoid it, either by stun-locking enemies in small groups or outmaneuvering them. GoldenEye and Perfect Dark have a magnificent style of combat where you can step into an enemy, taking advantage of their relatively slow lock time to move past them. In a strange way, this plodding console shooter feels more like John Woo than even the actual John Woo video game. Almost every aspect of 13 was done before and done better by other games, most of them James Bond games for whatever reason. If you want a globe-hopping spy adventure with variety gameplay, every one of the Brosnan-era James Bond games would be a better choice. The World Is Not Enough had a better social stealth bank level than this, Agent Under Fire had better grappling hook mechanics, Nightfire had better multiplayer. Several of these games even have vehicle segments. 13 couldn't even dream of that level of variety. It's also kind of janky, but not in the charmingly quixotic way of real Eurojank games. The crucial difference is that real Eurojank is from Eastern Europe, not Western Europe. The good shit is from the former Soviet Union. Maybe we should call it Comblock Jank instead. The AI in 13 is half-baked. It takes very little effort on your part to get them to completely lose the will to fight. The stealth mechanic is rough around the edges and rough in the middle and has a rough underbelly. I love that when you're sneaking around, if you accidentally walk into a sloped surface, you stand up and get spotted immediately. That's fun. Also, I wasn't actually able to finish the game this time around because one of the levels is totally unplayable, at least on my system on the Steam version. Anyway, the plot. 13 is based on the movie The Bourne Identity, which was based on the French graphic novel 13, which was itself based on the Bourne Identity book by Robert Ludlum. Seriously, don't look it up, I swear that's all true. It's like the circle of life, American IP getting stolen, circulating abroad for a while, and then coming back to true patriot soil. God bless this mess. In 13, you play as David Duchovny, a secret agent who gets shot while trying to assassinate somebody on a boat. He survives, but with a case of explosive amnesia, and the only clue to his identity is the number of a safe deposit box. Over the course of the game, you uncover a big global conspiracy, and just as you're about to put all the pieces together, the game dead ends at a cliffhanger. Nice. The games industry was awfully arrogant in the early 2000s. I think they assumed any old IP could get a guaranteed sequel. 13 deviates from the stolen source material pretty quickly after the start, but that's honestly to its detriment. You meet a lot of overly zany characters and get involved in wacky situations that don't make for particularly good levels. There's a prison level that is especially bad. You probably know how much I fucking hate prison levels. I find the plot of 13 to be pretty much dumb. The kitchen sink conspiracy has a little bit of everything in there. Ersatz President Kennedy getting assassinated, a secret society who may also be the Ku Klux Klan, mad scientists, Saturday morning cartoon villains. It's just too much. Metered out over the course of a 20-volume graphic novel series, I'm sure it all had time to breathe, but when crammed into a bad 10-hour video game, it'll leave your head spinning and your eyes rolling. Cel-shaded games can generally be divided into two camps, those that use the art style to mask dodgy graphics, and those that use the art style to cover for bad gameplay. 13 has a tent in both camps, but you could make the point that without the cartoon graphical style, the cartoon characters and plot points would feel even more out of place. Tonally speaking, this isn't a hard-edged thriller like The Bourne Identity, which is still a great film by the way, the only worthwhile one in the series. Director Doug Liman isn't the most prolific, and he's not a household name, but he's got a few solid credits to his name, Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Edge of Tomorrow being the two I like best. The action scenes in The Bourne Identity are sparse, but measured and impactful. The sequels really fucked that up. They were apparently directed by a sentient shaky cam instead of Doug Liman. Nothing in the sequels is as smartly put together as the simple little action scenes in the first movie. Like when Bourne is looking for a weapon in the house in the country. He finds a shotgun shell in a drawer, then notices the kids' toys everywhere, and deduces that the shotgun is going to be somewhere out of reach. This scene plays out as the background actions to an unrelated dialogue scene. The following fight is put together so well and without any dialogue that it's 100% believable to watch Bourne, armed with a double barrel and some birdshot, completely outplay Clive Warren. Hey, you guys remember how Clive Warren was in like fucking every movie for a few years? That was weird. Anyhow, how does David Duchovny fit into this? He barely does. He doesn't have all that many lines, and in those he sounds sleepy and disinterested.
Mr. Boland? It's been such a long time. I assume you want to access your safe? May I have your key? Right this way, please.
In my hazy memory, Area 51 was the same shit. Duchovny doesn't seem happy to be there.
I've fallen into my own trap.
Did he need money? It's not uncommon for actors to get shafted by sudden financial troubles and have to score a few easy paydays to placate the IRS. Was he a gamer ahead of the curve? I mean, the guy is the same age as my dad, and my dad hasn't played a video game since Genome in 1997. Was he directed badly, or did he just not give a shit? Possibly some of both. Maybe Duchovny just isn't the right guy for voiceover work. There are plenty of games with high-profile actors doing a great job of voiceover. Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops 1 both spring to mind. Despite the heavy-hitting talent present in both of those games, nobody really gets top billing, but they're all still taking it very seriously. I'd place the blame 40-60 on Duchovny and the vocal direction. The Call of Duty franchise shows the benefits of budget and greater experience. I think the video game industry learned its lesson about putting famous people into the roles of laconic tabula rasa main characters. You can get a lot more mileage out of a famous name and voice in a supporting role, even with less screen time. That's a trick Bethesda figured out, possibly before anybody else.
I am your emperor, Uriel Sept.
13 also features the voice of Adam West as Captain Brigadier General Sergeant Major Guy. He's doing a better job than Duchovny, at least.
Ah, my cigars. Look at this half-wit.
But I can no longer remember a world before Family Guy undercut any chance of Adam West doing a serious role. If you need proof that Duchovny didn't care for video game voice work, just look at his total lack of video game credit since 2005.
You know, movies, TV shows, X-Files, Californication, and now music, so...
You've worked in a lot of different mediums, TV, film, music, writing.
Since then, he's written some books, and he even started making music. His first album, Hell or High Water, came out in 2015, and I actually really fucking like it. His second album from 2018 even features a song called Half-Life, so maybe he was a secret gamer. Let's see. Half my life by your side, through thick and thin, rain or shine. Oh, never mind. This is about something else. As a singer-songwriter, David Duchovny is a pretty good songwriter. Some of his lyrics are a bit verbose and don't always quite fit the meter. I think he might have learned his lesson after the first album. The second one's a little more polished and professional. Anyway, I don't mean to crap on David Duchovny. He seems cool, and he's making some pretty good music right now, and he seems super into it.
First question is, like, in tech, so we have this,
Tech?
you know...
You lost me.
Maybe he was always supposed to be a musician, and that whole acting lark was just to pay the bills.
I get an opportunity to reach more people than I probably would if I didn't have any kind of notoriety, but also I don't get taken seriously, like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, why don't you just stay in your own lane?
No, it's okay to have multiple hobbies. No man is ever just one thing. Thanks for watching.